A 3-year-old says, "I hate the cold." You ask why. She says, "Because mommy hates the cold." That is not a child expressing preference. That is a child learning identity by inheritance. And the question isn't, does she hate the cold? The question is, every parent knows this moment, and your child is standing in a doorway, or in the kitchen, or on the edge of the couch with their shoes half on. Nothing big is happening technically, no crisis, no emergency, just a small moment with a little tension inside it, and you can feel it before they say anything. They're about to choose, not a life or death choice, just one of those everyday choices that quietly trains a person. The choice to tell the truth or hide, the choice to try again or quit, the choice to speak up or stay silent, the choice to take responsibility or hand it off. Most people think the decision begins when the action begins. It doesn't. The decision begins earlier, and if you're raising a girl, that earlier matters more than almost anything else, because the world will eventually try to train her to move without thinking, to match energy, to mirror emotion, to borrow beliefs, to outsource her reasoning, to trade her inner authority for approval. This isn't about controlling behavior. It's about protecting the space where her choices are born. There is a moment before reaction, before defense, before explanation, before performance, before, "but she did it too," before, "I don't know," before, "I hate this," before, "I can't." That moment is small, quiet, almost invisible, and it's where readiness forms. This is raising ready girls, and this is not advice. It's an observation, a model. Something you can see once and then you can't unsee. The moment before choice is the difference between a girl who becomes reactive and a girl who becomes ready. So let's talk about pause. Not as a cute acronym, not as a tool, not as something you force onto a child like a script. Pause is simply the name for something strong people already do. They interrupt the automatic, they create a gap. And inside that gap, they choose from strength instead of from pressure. A position of weakness is when a decision is made because someone else's thinking is driving, someone else's emotion is driving, someone else's belief is driving, someone else's story is driving. A position of strength is when a decision is made from your own ability to gather information, interpret it, and move anyway, without needing a guaranteed outcome to justify your choice. Pause is how that strength becomes available. It starts with the simplest thing. A pause. Not a pause where you freeze, not a pause where you avoid. A pause where you create space. A pause is not nothing. A pause is the beginning of ownership. Parents sometimes miss this because they want the right outcome. They want the child to behave. They want the moment to end. They want peace. They want it resolved. And that's understandable, especially when you're tired. But a child can comply and still be unready. They can do the right thing for the wrong reason. They can say the right words while their inner world is still outsourced. And if you're raising ready girls, you're not only building behavior, you're building the internal place where behavior comes from. So pause begins with the pause, and then it moves into reflection. Reflection isn't overthinking. Reflection is not a debate. Reflection is simply asking, what is happening inside me right now, and what belongs to me? This is where it gets interesting because many adults never learn to do this. They live their whole lives inside borrowed reactions. A 3-year-old says, "I hate the cold." You ask why. She says, "Because mommy hates the cold." That is not a child expressing preference. That is a child learning identity by inheritance. And the question isn't, does she hate the cold? The question is that reason hers? Because borrowed reasons become borrowed lives. A borrowed belief cannot hold up under pressure. It collapses, and then people become defensive. That's why so many adults get upset when you ask them, why? Not because the question is disrespectful, but because the answer isn't theirs. So when we teach pause, we are not teaching children to challenge everyone. We are teaching them to belong to their own mind. That is a form of protection. Now, reflection has to stay gentle, especially with kids. If you turn reflection into an interrogation, you'll train hiding, not honesty. You'll train performance, not ownership. So the reflection is simple. What do you notice? What makes you say that? What do you think is true for you? That's it. And then pause moves into act. Act doesn't mean do something big. It means choose a next step, even if it's small. A lot of people get stuck here because they think readiness means confidence. Readiness doesn't mean you feel strong. It means you can move with integrity even when you don't feel strong. It means you can choose even when you're uncertain. It means you can accept an outcome, even a negative one, without surrendering your authority. This is where raising ready girls becomes real, because children will sometimes choose and get a negative outcome. And this is where many parents panic, because they think a negative outcome means the choice was wrong. But sometimes the wrong outcome is the lesson. Sometimes the negative outcome teaches more than the positive one ever could. A positive outcome can reward borrowed thinking. It can reward luck. It can reward mimicry. It can reward staying inside someone else's plan. A negative outcome, when held correctly, teaches the child, I can survive this, I can learn, I can adjust, I can return. That's strength. So pause is not designed to create perfect choices. It's designed to create own choices. And if you're raising a girl, that matters more than being right. Because being right is not what protects her later. Being owned is what protects her. Now let's make this even more practical, without turning it into a checklist. Here's a moment you will recognize. Your daughter is upset. She feels treated unfairly. She wants to quit something, a sport, a club, a friendship, something important, and you can feel that she's about to make a decision inside emotion. This is not the time to lecture. This is not the time to motivate. This is not the time to fix her feelings. This is the time to pause. You create the pause first, not by demanding it, but by modeling it. You lower your own speed. You lower your own volume. You become steady. You become the calm boundary of the moment, because the model makes the language worth listening to. Then you name what you see without judgment. It feels like a lot right now. And then you ask the reflective question. Before we decide, what do you notice? Sometimes that question alone is enough to interrupt the automatic. Then you let her speak, and you listen for something very specific. Are her reasons hers, or are they borrowed? Borrowed reasons sound like this. Everybody says, they always, I'm just not, it's because she, mom said, my friend said. Owned reasons sound like this. I felt, I noticed. When that happened, I thought, I don't like how I acted. I want to try again. You don't shame borrowed reasons. You don't attack the people attached to them. You just guide her back to herself. That might be true for them. What's true for you? And then when it's time to act, you keep it small. What's the next step that keeps you in strength? Not, what's the step that makes you comfortable? Not, what's the step that makes them change? Not, what's the step that guarantees success? The next step that keeps you in strength. Sometimes the next step is a conversation. Sometimes it's rest. Sometimes it's finishing what you started. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's trying again. And then the most important part, you don't turn the outcome into identity. If it goes well, you don't say, see, I told you. You say, you owned that. If it goes poorly, you don't say, I knew it. You say, we learned. Because the goal is not a perfect child. The goal is a ready human. Now this connects to something deeper you teach. Joy is just on you. Because when a girl learns pause, she learns she is not trapped inside the moment. She has access to herself. She can return. Joy isn't constant happiness. Joy is the ability to come back. That's why Smiles as a nickname is so powerful. It's an invitation and a reminder, not a demand, not a performance, a doorway. Pause is one of the doorways back to joy. And this also connects to time, health, education, relationships, money. When a girl learns to pause, she starts to notice what's overheating in her life, not because someone is scoring her, but because she is becoming aware. Time is overheating when she's always rushed and reactive. Health is overheating when her emotions control her body and her body never gets rest. Education is overheating when she thinks learning is proving instead of growing. Relationships are overheating when approval becomes her compass. Money is overheating when impulse becomes normal. Pause gives her a way to notice the heat before it becomes a fire. And yes, you can teach this without making her anxious, without making her hyper self-aware, without turning life into a constant evaluation. How? You keep it human. You treat her like a person, not a project. Human first. And you remember that inside every girl is a woman and inside every woman is a girl. Meaning she is learning leadership and she still needs care. Pause honors both. It respects her ability to think and it protects her from being forced to think alone. Now, if you're listening and thinking, this sounds simple, it is. Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple means repeatable. And repeatable is where readiness lives. A ready girl is not a girl who never reacts. A ready girl is a girl who notices sooner. She notices sooner that she's borrowing. She notices sooner that she's rushing. She notices sooner that she's handing her joy away. She notices sooner that she's about to choose from weakness. And because she notices sooner, she has a chance to choose differently. And that's the entire point. So the next time you see that moment in your home, the moment before the choice, don't rush to correct the behavior. Protect the pause. Model the steadiness. Ask the quiet question. Guide her back to her own reason. Let her choose. Let her learn. And if the outcome is imperfect, don't panic. Sometimes the lesson is the win. When the moment comes again, she'll notice it sooner. That is the point. If this way of thinking resonates, I invite you to stay.